so many people have it right now.
Oh yeah.
I was reading yesterday. It's the fastest spreading virus of all time, Omicron.
Yeah.
For every one person that's infected, 6 more people get infected.
Right, but it seems like it's a little lesser, which is like hopefully that gets us to like
Up
where
and down, so
it gets it to what people need to, you know, beat it a little bit. So
yeah, yeah. No, my wife and I aren't vaccinated yet either, and but Shaylee had COVID, probably Delta,
yeah,
back in like September, October, and
right.
so the doctor was like, yeah, more than likely the antibodies have like went to the baby. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, so
And
that's
yeah,
cool.
Bonnie,
The way that
Bonnie
worked
had
out.
it while she was pregnant, so that didn't make us as concerned. And then now, like our biggest concern is spreading it, like spreading it to our mother-in-law or our aunts who have like they can't get they're high risk. So it's like, but they've proven that that's not really doing. It doesn't prevent you from transferring it. It looks, or I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Our pediatrician yesterday, because we were kind of talking about it in our appointment, and he was like, yeah, a lot of parents are asking me if they should get vaccinated, if they should get their kids vaccinated. He's like, Omicron has shown that it doesn't care about a vaccination or a booster. He's like, so I'm recommending, like, don't even worry about it. Like, it doesn't matter. And so
the community, and I just did something like that. And so we did that, and then kind of just got connected with the guys that way, and then started, then that group kind of disbanded, and just people kind of had other stuff going on, but we still listed connected with other groups and stuff like that.
Does he have? Which one of you have land out in Kansas, or you just go do public out there?
No, he's that has something set out. So he just invited me, and then our buddy Doug. Dude, have you met Doug yet?
What's the last
Doug Wechter?
That sounds familiar, but I'm not
sure. No, he's a realtor at Hood and Sullivan, and then he's if you watch any of the Rays games, you probably have seen him before. Like he does some of the speaking for that stuff. So, but he's a good he's hilarious. He's a good guy. So
nice.
We're off with him.
Never been duck hunting. Always wanted to.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's
Besides
awesome.
the waking up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's good practice.
Yeah.
All right. So, Cameron, do you want? Who's going to play point on this one?
You're a better point guard.
All right. All right, if your volume in your headphones is too loud or not loud enough, just let me know. It's really there to keep you close to the microphone, give you some feedback. Because if you start getting a little bit farther away, you'll know it. But just whatever you're comfortable with. I'll be fiddling with it over here just to see if if we need to close the door or whatever. It gets kind of hot in here, so we'll leave it open if we can. It's a pretty informal podcast, so
cool.
None of this is going to win a Grammy.
Not yet. Not with that mentality, right?
Here's the beach lot.
Yeah, it is right there. Nice. Just burn on the fan. Yeah, no, it sounds good to me. Does it sound good to you?
Let me see here. Go ahead and give
if
me
I stand up, it's the same. Okay. Either way, yeah,
That's
it sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Cameron, how are you over there?
Testing. Sound pretty good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
A natural.
No.
One take Cameron, that's what we call him.
Yeah. No, it's every time I lead, we have
to be careful in the setting you use that, right?
Yeah, right.
We, I say that jokingly because Karen, I don't remember which one it was, but we had to restart it 2 or 3 times because he was doing the intro and it was fine, but I guess he wanted to be perfect, so he kept going back. All right, let me start the music and we will get going. Let me just make sure this is going to be. That's good. Welcome to the Axiom Podcast. I'm Joey Brannon. Be hosting today with Cameron Earhart, and we're excited to have Kyle Clement with us. So welcome, Kyle. We're going to be talking about basically specialization and niche marketing, and you're the man because you own a marketing firm. And so we're really glad to have you. Thanks for coming down. We're looking forward to talking to you. So I was introduced to Kyle by Cameron a few months ago, and another mutual friend that we talk about Mike Thackeray so often on this podcast. We should just give him like a guest hosting spot because he's always top of mind. But we had a chance to sit down with Mike and learn a little bit about your business. But just tell us a little bit more about you and Clemtech. Well, that's the name of your company.
Yeah. So I have Clemtech and the vet marketing firm, and so we're a digital marketing agency, and we say our mission is to be good stewards of everything our clients entrust us to grow their business online. And so we're doing websites, we're doing their PPC, their paid click, their paid Facebook, search engine optimization, content creation, anything that's kind of involved in that digital ecosystem to help them kind of grow the business. And so then vet marketing firm is exactly what it says it is. We want to focus on, veterinarians, whereas Clemtech's more focused on local businesses, and we have a really heavy emphasis on, doctors' offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we love stories, right? And everybody's got a great story about like how the business started. So like, tell us your journey. Like, how long's Clemtech been around? How long has vet marketing firm been around? And what was kind of the genesis of it?
Yeah, I'll definitely start with Clemtech because that's kind of what led into and fed the vet marketing firm. But so right out of college, I was in, a sales role and had a little, side hustle too. It was actually, we were renting bounce houses, so like we'd go to like the festivals and stuff and rent these things out. And so at the time, it was kind of the Wild West of, Google was just getting started. I mean, this was probably back in 2005, 2006. So it wasn't as big yet. So I was still learning like website. I didn't know that much about websites. So we had, hired a website guy to help us run the business. And so at the time, not knowing much, you really had to rely. I mean, this was like our trusted advisor. You have your CPA, your attorney, and then your website guy. And so we, for whatever reason, just kind of, didn't hit off. It got into like a disagreement. He ended up like stealing the website from us, like and trying to sell it back to us for like $250,000. So he said like he needed my GoDaddy login to fix something, like our email wasn't working, something random, I don't remember. And so like then he sells it back. Then he's trying to sell it back to us, and like the business hardly even did that much in revenue total. Yeah. So it was like I learned all the wrong things early on. And we ended up kind of losing the business over that because it was like we had lost the domain, we lost like where all of our leads were coming from, and it kind of became my mission that, hey, I'm going to help other business owners, not make the same mistake I did. So had some other jobs, but on the side I was always doing consulting for websites, for digital marketing, and eventually in about, so 2006 I worked for another agency. 2009, and then 2011 is when I started Clemtech. And so from that, eventually just niched down and had an opportunity to meet a veterinarian who was like, hey, you have the marketing, I'm a vet, maybe we should try this out. Maybe it could work for me a little bit. And it actually ended up that we partnered together and kind of, so we had both running, simultaneously and they're still running simultaneously, and they kind of feed each other and work pretty cohesively.
There's a lot of directions we could go down after hearing that, but I want to go down probably the least likely one. Let's go back to that side hustle in the bounce house. That's
great.
That's incredible. How did that start?
So I was doing sales, and but I always kind of felt like I was an entrepreneur. Right out of college, doing sales, and so it was actually something that my dad was retired, and he kind of had found this business. It was a business that was like available for brokerage, and so he thought it was something that my brother would get into and that they would kind of like run together. And so I was over in Orlando, they were back in Tampa, and so they kind of got it started, but then neither one of them really wanted to deal with the day-to-day. So I was like, oh, maybe this is an opportunity. I kind of came in and took it over. I think my brother kind of did something else and did his own thing, so like just kind of like fell in where I was like, hey, I can do this. I know the web stuff enough, and maybe not as much as I thought I did, So very random, but it was, it was a unique opportunity. So whereas most people rented out bounce houses, this business would go to like a festival, like the Rib Fest at the time, and so they would say, hey, you don't have to pay anything to rent the bounce houses, but we'll charge bracelets for every kid that comes through, like $5, $10, and so they'd make a lot more cash flow that way rather than just like a fixed fee. It was more, every day they were getting some cash flow from the different people coming through, and then they'd share a percentage of it with the festival.
Okay, so did you feel like kind of growing that, experiencing that lit that entrepreneurial flame inside you?
And I also had it. I was, at the time when I was in sales, we were doing insurance, and I loved talking to business owners. I loved the opportunity of like sitting across the table and like trying to solve problems. And I was like, but insurance was never the avenue that I was good at it, and I think I did really well my first year just because I had a business development kind of brain, and I was comfortable sitting across from business owners because I'd just been around that my whole life. But the insurance was not the vehicle. So as I had the side hustle, it grew into like, hey, I do like this entrepreneur thing. I need to go out and try to, do my own thing a little bit more. And, that definitely led to it for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Love hearing those kind of stories of just, I mean, that's probably one of the more unique ones.
Bounce. Everyone, my friends, you call you like, on weekends you'll hear I'm having to wake up early to go rent bounce houses. It's definitely, definitely has some funny stories that that go with that. So.
Makes me wonder, were it not for the crooked website guy, if you wouldn't be like the bounce house king of southeastern United States today.
Who knows? And like there's definitely it seemed like. Because now it was funny, like we rented a bounce house recently at my son's too, and so we rented a bounce house for him for his birthday in October. And like I'm hitting it off with the bounce, like he has all the same stuff. We're kind of talking about bounce houses, but I didn't miss it at all. I kind of, I liked the side of the table that I was on for sure. So everything
funny.
happened for a very important reason. So,
So it's interesting that we're going to get more into Clemtech and vet marketing firm. But there's like some serendipity in that whole story, we'll call it providence. But it's interesting that I got all wrapped up here. It's interesting that you had a couple of changes, and then you parlayed those into what you're doing today. Have there been any other things along the way? Because you're very entrepreneurial. Like that probably wasn't your only side hustle. Probably like what are some of the other things that you like came across and you pursued them for a while, but they didn't quite get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so with the web business early on, I started with a business partner, and he was big, or I kind of became like, he had a one-man shop, but he was selling websites. And so I was working with a business. They were the vendor for the business that I was working with at the time and helping them with some marketing. And so I was like, man, he's selling websites. I think this could become an agency. And so I kind of partnered up with him. And he was just big on websites, and I always wanted to be more on the marketing. I like the idea of like recurring revenue and more, like the idea that, hey, like there's more than just building a website. Like it's, you really need to build it, you need to manage it, you need to maintain it. And I thought we were just leaving a lot on the table by not helping people manage it and maintain it, because I, just coming from my own experiences. And so with that, it just like, and plus we also didn't have the same core values at all. Like the way he wanted to run his business was not the way I wanted to run it. And so like we were growing the way we were treating clients. So it was just a pretty easy decision to say like, hey, let's just part ways. I'm going to go more the marketing route. You can stick to the web design route that you want to go. And so that was like, that really came. And once that happened, I've been in real estate, and that's something I've stuck with, and it's just, but that's more, complementary to what I'm doing on the website side. And I've started some things, here and there. I long term, I'd love to be able to. I just love business in general. It's so cool, the people ideas that they have, and kind of you guys get to talk about it and hear about it all the time, and it's fun just to see the different ways people can accomplish something and help people. There's a lot of ways to help people, especially in that the world we're in now. So and as far as other things that have got going, I mean we've had some ideas. I think now like we really stuck on the ongoing marketing. Now we're actually starting a software that's going to complement our marketing efforts, and so that's probably the next phase is to have like a software that really complements what we're doing, so that's a little bit more it just again kind of combines a lot of different things that are out there and makes it a little easier for these owners to accomplish what they want to accomplish and make it really, we're big on transparency, so it's also something that we think there's a need in the marketplace right now for like results-based marketing, and so that's what we're trying to shift to with this software.
Nice. When you talk about the different, so I want to save vet marketing firm for like the next question or two, but and Clemtech, when you started up, were there any kind of milestones or breakpoints? Like what were the growing pains you experienced with Clemtech up to where you are now?
Well, yeah, in Clemtech, early on I was like a solopreneur. Like it wasn't true business. It was a job that I was, like I was probably more freelance or like kind of like a GC model, and I would sub everything out. Okay. So everything was freelance. So that created its own set of challenges. I mean, like we were, early on, a lot of what we did, and just because this is kind of what I knew, but I would close a deal and then I'd try to like outsource it overseas. And so like I had relationships over there, and there's some great talent, but it was like for the way I worked, it was tough for me to like manage those people and try to sell, in business development, which was relationship building, which is probably more my strength, and then trying to manage the business. So like I think one thing I didn't do is probably get like a project manager early on, and so like I was really reliant on the tech that in the developers I was using over there. So a big milestone for me was like bringing on that first employee. Like when I had a project manager, it just like it really changed. It went from like having a job to having a business in my mind. Because like that's when you're doing it yourself and you're doing everything, and even though you're like subbing some stuff out, you're still having to like handle the client and handle the the back end of the project management.
So what was the trigger for bringing that project manager on? Because if entrepreneurs started with a big bucket of money, there's a chance that they may blow it. But really, I mean, it's kind of can turbocharge growth when you can go out and hire resources before you maybe you would have the capital from earnings to do them. But so like, what was the push-pull for you? Did you pull the trigger a little bit earlier than you knew you had the money to cover it, or did you just gut it out and grind it until you had the reserve? And
I probably just grinded it to the point where I had enough like of the recurring, revenue that I was like, okay, I can definitely bring someone on, and I see, I can, it'll force me to kind of hustle and get people on. So I definitely did not do it early enough. I mean, I think you have to delegate the things you're not good at. I mean, that's, as an entrepreneur, you can't be good at everything. The vision takes so much more time, and the sales and marketing, and then just operations and finance, HR. I mean, there's so many different things that you have to deal with, and it's impossible to be great at all of them.
Yeah.
So it just kind of came to the realization like, hey, I'm not providing the best services for my clients by not having someone to like kind of handle the day to day. So as we brought on more clients, and that was definitely a big piece of it, and something we'll get into later, like with vet marketing firm. I actually lost my business partner. We can talk about that too. Is like, so that after losing the business partner, it was like I was forced to bring someone on at that point.
Gotcha.
And so kind of circumstances really led into that. Yeah, he had passed away, kind of unexpectedly.
Okay.
And really kind of, push came to shove at that moment.
When you're in a very technical business,
Yeah.
right? There's a technical skill set that's required for you guys to deliver to clients. How far did you get pulled into the technical space? Because it's interesting. You said I was outsourcing stuff and I was pushing stuff overseas. So it seems like you tried to maintain some distance from the tech, maybe because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're not going to get service. But the E-Myth talks a lot about that fallacy of, well, I'm good at doing this technical skill, so I'll be good at running a business that delivers this technical skill, and it just doesn't work out. So how have you managed that?
Yeah, I think I know enough in order to like be dangerous. I've always had the personality where like if I want to, like when we remodeled our bathroom, like the first one, I want to try it myself first, and like when I get to a point where I can't do it, or at least want to know how to do it. Like, so I want to know how to put tile up on the wall. Not that I want to put put every piece of tile up there, but I want to know how to do it just so I can like communicate it and talk about it. So I had, like built a website. I kind of like hit my head against the wall trying to figure it out, and but I realized that very quickly that that was not my strength. So I knew enough to like kind of talk the language, and then I read a book. And it was about IBM's project management. It talked about like the iron triangle, and so like you have development, like your deliverable, your time frame, and your cost. And so like real on you have it. So I would always talk to my developers this way, and I say, hey, listen, I'm either gonna we're gonna pre-negotiate costs because you have a fixed rate, or I have a budget that I gotta stay under. But then we have two other variables, time and deliverable. So I'm either gonna give you a time frame, and you're gonna give me a deliverable. So that way I never really box you into this like you have to get this done by this time, unless it's something I've done and I know and I can coach on. So early on, that's kind of how I learned, is I got to like figure out, hey, here's the deliverable, here's the time frame, or here's the time, and then I was just really big on accountability because like and that's how I kind of chose who I was going to work with and who I wasn't going to work with.
That's an interesting. I've heard that idea of like there's the way I've heard it is you can have it good, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap. You know, like you got to pick two of those. You can't have all three. And that's kind of what you're describing, but I've never, and that's always been relayed in terms of like dealing with purchasing something or an outside provider. It strikes me as interesting. If you were to, when we work with leadership teams, you're working with a business owner and maybe a controller and a sales manager and an operations manager, and there are projects that come up, right, that the business owner needs this or that done, like we're going through a merger and acquisition or a new software conversion, to go to those people and say, I can give you the deliverable and you can tell me how quickly you can get it back to me, or you can tell me how much time you have to work and I'll give you the amount, what I want delivered in that amount of time. It kind of empowers them in a different way, all right? Because I think a lot of times they hedge making commitments because they're being asked to make a commitment on both the deliverable and the time frame. right? And so there's two opportunities to hedge. But if you take one of those out and say, okay, like this is the one that's going to stay fixed, and we'll make the other one fit within whatever that constraint is, it gives them an opportunity to set the terms of like what they're going to commit to a little bit more. So.
Yeah, and I think it creates a better culture, at least in our situation, and it doesn't put as much stress on them, and it like where they're having to get something done that day and stay until 10 o'clock at night, and it really helps manage expectations,
right.
Which is important for like when you're dealing with a client, and you can then say, hey, I will have this by this time frame because that's what we've committed to, and if not, then
right.
That's really quickly to find the right person and get the right person on the bus.
Very good. Let's talk about vet marketing firm.
Yeah.
Because if you go to your LinkedIn profile, there's two businesses there, and that's always interesting where it's like such and such date to present, such and such date to present. You're like, what? They're running two businesses. So tell us about vet marketing firm. So there's some serendipity of you run into the veterinarian. So it was a veterinarian you were doing some digital marketing and website work for?
Well, actually, he was a consultant for veterinarians.
Okay.
So like I had the website company. I would work with a vet, but I'd actually worked with a lot of dentists. I have
okay.
some family who are in the dental field. They have a dental practice, and so I'd always been kind of around that, and so I understood that language, and so did some marketing and some even did like a dental assisting school, marketing and stuff like that. And so when I met him, we were kind of talking, and he had a website that was online Ask a Veterinary service. So he was very familiar. He had built this, website with a contractor. So he had a very marketing savviness to him, been involved with some startups, but it was doing consulting for veterinarians on their group purchasing. And so he's like, hey, I got these veterinarians. There's always a need for marketing. Maybe I can just like sub it out to you. You pay me a commission. And it works out. And I was like, yeah, we kind of hit it off, and he was here in St. Pete, or where I'm from in St. Pete. And so yeah, we started to talk it through, and then as I kind of heard like what his goals were and what his visions were, like he was saying how a lot of vets didn't own their website, and I was like, well, that's like a huge passion for me. He's like, other agencies own it and then like sub it out, or they like put their call tracking number and then they're selling the leads back to the vets, and so it's like very like there was definitely poise for like, man, there's some like this is kind of my this is an area we can help, and he had the contacts and great speaker, brilliant individual. And so I was like, maybe let's just start, rather than run it through Clemtech, it might be cleaner just to like start our own entity. And so it was going to be, we had a third partner that was going to kind of join us, and and it ended up he didn't really want to leave his full-time job, and so the two of us started this entity, which and from there it was really cool opportunity. We saw it like right away. There was a huge need. Vets were like needed like transparent marketing, like they needed to make sure they owned their website. All the stuff that I had been with, very, like you said, serendipitous from prior. So we just started working, and we were doing that. We were like building their websites, we were managing it, maintaining it, and then we were Google partners, so we were running like Google ads, and then eventually added Facebook ads when that time came around. So just really big on like getting. So the big difference between vets and dentists is you just got to call, instead of a patient, which a dentist is trying to attract, a vet's trying to attract a client, because the patient can't go on the computer, and in
that's
most
your next
cases,
big challenge for marketing directly to
directly
the
to
dogs
the
and
dog.
cats themselves.
Yeah, that'd be the the unicorn if you could. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So two entities, but shared employees, I'm guessing. Okay.
Well, at first it was I didn't have employees before working with him. So after, it was just he and I, and then we kind of used some of my contractors and stuff like that. So he and I were just doing everything at first. He would actually he'd like to build the websites, which we tried, had to get off his plate, real quickly. Yeah. So it was just the two of us. And then that's what I said after, he actually passed away in 2015. So the business had been, running for, 3 years or so like that. And then after that, then Clemtech, I needed to get employees. I always had kept Clemtech around because I just had clients and relationships. So after that, that's really when it was like, okay, I need to get an employee here on Clemtech. And then it ended up that those employees started working through both.
Okay, so talk to us about some of the challenges that's presented.
Yeah, and it is probably not the ideal. At some point, maybe they merge together. It's always just been like, vet marketing firm is really, now it's become, since I've completely purchased out the other half of vet marketing firm and everything like that, it's become its own entity, but it's like the employees are using both. So we have two separate ticket systems, two separate websites, but a lot of the work, it's the same processes that you're getting things done. I mean, like we have our systems for vets, and we have our processes that work really well for vets, and then it's the same kind of stuff behind the scenes. When you're trying to target new customers through the door, there's not a lot of like, there's not difference, right? It's the same kind of like the same. Yes, you're going to change the offers. Yes, you're going to change the, some of the conversion, some of the language and things like that. But at the end of the day, getting your offer in front of someone, is really good. And if you let the vets do what they do really good and they let us do what we're really good at, which is being, behind the scenes, it's a great relationship. And that's why we're able to work in so many different industries and stuff like that. So really Clemtech is the entity that has all of our, has our employees. And then Vet Marketing Firm has its own, group and has some of its own employees there. So like there's certain things that we keep separate, but some of the development stuff like that, we definitely pull resources together to get them both accomplished.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. So how do you, as you're running both companies, you have both companies listed on your LinkedIn. Right now you're wearing a vet marketing shirt. Yeah. So how do you prevent the, Clemtech getting pigeonholed into the vet marketing firm and keeping them separate? So for example, if you're talking to, someone who owns a concrete company and they're looking for marketing, but you're potentially wearing a vet marketing firm, how do you distinguish the two? How do you talk to them?
Changes shirts in the car.
I have thought about that. There's a story I love with the CEO of Under Armour. When he was getting started, he used to carry like 2 business cards, and he had like the president card in one pocket, and then he had the sales manager card in the other pocket. So like, depending if he was talking to a mom and pop, he gave him the president. So like, hey, you're talking to the owner. But if he was talking to like, Sports Authority or Dick's Sporting Goods, he's giving them the sales manager card, so they think that it's like a bigger company. So we haven't got quite that creative. It's just like with we have lead gen and a lot of stuff's done online now. So it's like you're not going to as many people face to face, and a lot of Clemtech is referral based, and so people know me, and I think Vet Marketing Firm, the fact that we have this niche site is a big bonus to what we're trying to do. So it's a niche vertical. It's almost like if someone's like, hey, we only work on Ford. Well, we could probably still, a lot of auto shops could still work on a Chevy or a Porsche or something national or international. But like at the end of the day, it's like this is our subset of who we really specialize with. And we're really trying to shift that whole paradigm to saying like, hey, and I think the goal for like 2022 is to really say, hey, like we work with like dentists, vets, dermatologists, and that's like, and then if a friend gets referred to us, we're gonna help them, and we do a lot of work with like restoration companies too, just by happenstance and just having relationships in the space. So as we develop relationships, we'll bring on the people. But I think because I've worked with so many businesses over the years, and I've just talked to so many different business owners, like as you guys can attest, it's like if you know how to like discover the problem and you know how to like understand what their problems are and then and put the solution, it doesn't really matter. Yes, the niche is going to help you for marketing, and it's going to help you to like become more omnipresent in the marketplace and like have more authority. But at the end of the day, it doesn't stop you from being able to work with like people in other industries, because at the end of the day, like what we're trying to execute is very similar, and there's some like Google's best practices, and as long as you follow those, you're able to
Sure.
to accomplish their goals.
So you say niche, I say niche. So but doing the vet marketing firm is clearly worked out well for you. It's growing. Yeah. Have you ever considered, like, wow, maybe I should do this in a different industry? Maybe I should have the dental marketing firm.
Well, and that's what we're seeing now. Like we do work with a bunch of dentists, and that's why I said I think we're very, very intentional about working in the dental space. I always so like I said, my uncle and aunt have a dental practice with multi-locations. We started working with them a few years ago, and I always felt like though, like before I work with my family, like in the dental side, this vet opportunity was a way for me to like kind of prove myself for, and that opportunity fell in my lap, really, if you think about it. Yeah. And so now I'm starting to see like, hey, you have to find a natural market that you can relate to and that you can really understand, and that you have, really credible, testing grounds and stuff like that to like be able to accomplish your results and bring it to the marketplace. And so dentistry is probably the long-term goal, really. And now we also have an avenue into dermatology that we're starting to partner with. So like, I think there's so many similarities between the three. Like to run an effective practice, it's yes, there's differences obviously between dogs and humans, but to run an effective practice, medical practice, animal health practice, dental practice, there's very, very similar common sense. It's like the same thing to say, like, can you only work with a contracting company. No, we can work with a business because there's common principles that relate to all three of them. But the more niche we can be, I think the better it helps us to like serve that audience and just reach that audience.
So potentially the bounce house marketing firm. Maybe we'll see.
If they have if they can,
You know the inside track on that.
I know. It's been, if I haven't forgotten it, yeah, for sure. No, but yeah, we can go to like a lot of people want to stick to one niche, and I get it. I think I'm unique in that I own real estate. I've probably, like, there's guys that have like, HVAC marketing firms out there, but I've probably purchased more, HVAC units in the last year than most of those guys have in their entire life of running the company. So like, I've been through the process, and like I can, when you can relate to those experiences, I mean, that's a big part of it is like understanding their pain points. I understand their pain points because I've been on the other side of the table, so like, and everyone, so that's where I think it kind of allows me to work in some of these other areas of problems and how it goes through. And so I think that's where yes, I want to stick to the niche, and I think the long-term avenue is going to be, again, the dental, derm, and vet, because those are so similar, and we have a lot of great results, and and we have a kind of a unique approach that I think can help us there.
What's I picture running multiple businesses. So I dabbled for a couple of years in an online education business, and it was really my redheaded stepchild of my business children. And so how do you balance? I think I personally, just the way I'm wired, it's kind of like focus on one thing at a time. But you seem to be able to keep a lot more plates spinning at one time. Do you have is there ever a challenge of like, well, should I be more focused on this one or more focused on that one?
Well, I think it's getting the right people in place we have a great team, and I could not do it without the team. And that's the only way, that's why, Clemtech Clemtech was just kind of like a, hey, in case it was like a safety net, like in case vet marketing firm doesn't work, I still have Clemtech, which there's good and bads for doing that, but now it's like I have good people in place, and they're really like, they run the business. I run the business the exact same way. It's not like I'm trying to like run, a marketing agency and a restaurant, these are two marketing agencies. Like we use all the same tech. I mean, it's as different as like, I literally just have to have two screens. On one I have my Clemtech email, and one I have my vet marketing firm email open. So I have Chrome open on here and Safari open on here, so I can just like check them at the same time. I have my QuickBooks. I just literally have two different, areas on there that can, so it's like they're like literally running the exact same way, and so like everything's able to just be like kind of copy and paste it over. I don't know if it would be as easy to like if you'd have to have really really good people in place, and that might be a longer term play to be able to do, like if I wanted to have a marketing agency and then something actually run a veterinary office or something like that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So I like how you're able to. There's a little bit of vertical integration in what you've done with the veterinary niche marketing firm and Clemtech, but there's also some horizontal diversification with the real estate, and you obviously treat that like a business too. It's not as maybe demanding in your 9 to 5, but at 2 and 3 a.m. it's probably demanding in other ways.
Yeah,
right?
There's been times. For sure.
So it's interesting how if as you look forward, you've mentioned a couple of others that would be more in that vertical integration space. Do you have any? I'm just curious to know, like, is there an itch, like an entrepreneurial itch you'd like to scratch? You're like, well, I really want to own a classic car dealership, or I want to own. Is there anything that you're like, man, that would be a bucket list business to own?
I think, long term, I would love to get it. Like, I feel like my next phase, I like the idea of buying businesses, 'cause I like to get in there, and like that would be like a longer term strategy. I've always thought e-commerce, like kind of the reason we're in the office space we're in is I always thought I'd get an e-commerce business in there, and I did dabble. You said earlier, I did dabble in e-commerce a little bit, but it just proved more beneficial for me to do consulting for them than actually to like get into the actual, nuts and bolts of it. So, I get shiny object syndrome probably like most entrepreneurs. So like if you told me a business right now, by the end of our chat, I probably could get pretty excited about being into it. But over the years, I've tried to become more disciplined to say no. So because I still see that there's so much opportunity in where I'm at. So I'm trying to avoid that, too much of that. Yeah. But I think the e-commerce business would be something long term. I like this idea of software, and then maybe if we really perfect this model with the niche agency, and now that we're doing like I said, the dental, derm, and vet, maybe there's some maybe we really try to narrow in and go after one of these other verticals, and like we already have some really good with plumbers and restoration companies, and so that might be another avenue if we, as we're getting great results there, and
Yeah.
can work on that side.
So we try to get businesses to niche as much as possible because we just see how it makes so many other things easy. Right? It makes your marketing easier. It makes your operations playbook easier. But there's a lot of resistance to that. And so we were talking to a group yesterday, and they've identified kind of 4 business lines that they want to sell, 4 industries they want to sell into. And the question we put to them was, is there anything we need to do to make sure that our eye stays on the ball here? And their answer was no, because we make a lot of money from those things. And I was like, yeah, but is there the temptation that will be pulled away by other things? And it was like, well, no, because we make a lot of money from those things. And I was like, no, like maybe I was really struggling to communicate. And I was like, is it possible that we'll get distracted by other good things, like other business will come our way, but it's not in one of these 4 industries, and we will, we'll spend time and resources doing that instead of doing this? And they didn't see that as a problem because that's money too, right? and so we're gonna have to circle back to that eventually. We just kept running up against a brick wall, but that idea of, I think a lot of businesses fail to really specialize in niche because they say, oh yeah, we want to do, so for instance, we want to do veterinary practices and maybe derm and dentist down the road. And so we're going to, guys, as we're marketing, as we're out there selling, as we're prospecting, we want those, right? And then a contractor comes up, or plumbing company comes up, or law firm comes up, and it's like, well, yeah, of course we're going to take that. That pays the bills too. And you look back after 6 or 9 months or 2 years, and you're like, we really haven't made much progress in dentist, derms, and vet practices. I'm curious to know, do you think, like, I'm always looking for what is the behavioral nudge or push or shove that will really commit somebody to that space? And you had a partner, right? So it was like, he would get frustrated if you're like, yeah, we're going to go all in this vet space. And then you started selling to community banks, right? And you're like, I'm doing community bank websites now. I'd be like, whoa. Like you said, we were going to do this together. Do you think that helped, or would you have been doing this anyway?
I definitely think it helps to, like, and within your niche, you kind of have to, like, we knew that we wanted to work with multi-doctor practices that were doing a certain number in revenue, because then they can, like, afford the services that we needed to help them get to that next level. So I think the more micro you can go, the better, because it's just going to help you with your targeting. I mean, now with like Facebook and LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Google Ads, I mean, you can really button down and target, almost to the T, who it is that you're trying to reach. So I think the better your message relates to that person that you're trying to reach out to. I mean, it's just that story, if it's like, hey, we help, multi-location family dental practices, grow their new patients. And we do that by finding out how much it costs to attract and retain those new patients. And then we find out their return on ad spend so that you can get that number lower. So like now we have like a very quantifiable metric. So like I like the saying that, hey, it can't be managed if it can't be measured. So we come in and measure it first, and then we manage it. So like, yes, that can apply to other industries, but we just have certain partnerships and certain things just to scale. It's better when you can get a little bit more micro, because those economies of scale are going to be easier. Now, if you have, like you talked about earlier, like an unlimited budget or unlimited funds to come in, like maybe you can put that proprietor in each one of those verticals to really own it. But if you don't have somebody owning it who's going to be the authority in that space, I think it's just going to make it very, very difficult to get any kind of traction. I think it's like the more you can do the same thing over and over, it's going to make it better for your team, your culture, and everything else that you're trying to, emulate.
So when you're in the Clemtech, when you're wearing your Clemtech hat and you're going into a new business, and maybe it is a contractor, and do you find yourself like they're like, we need a better website that's that we know we need that, but what we really want is more online leads coming in, right? And do you find yourself having to basically put on your niche consulting hat and say like, well, who is the customer we're going to go after? Because we're not going to put a billboard up on the side of the interstate and cross our fingers that we're going to get the kind of calls you want.
Yeah, and with like Google and Facebook ads, there's like specific ways to target. Like I can, like if you guys came to me and said like, hey, this is who we're trying to target. I mean, we can it's going to take a little bit more time, but and a little bit more like investigative questioning on the onboarding process. But like we're going to be, if you run a good business we're going to be able to find out what makes your business great and be able to emulate that online. So like that's if it's someone who doesn't run a great business, it's going to be tougher. Like whereas there's a much longer onboarding process for someone who's not a dentist or a vet, because like we kind of have the blueprint for dentists and vets and really restoration companies and plumbers. We have that blueprint now because we've seen enough of them and we've done it. So because and again we've done this for over a decade. So early on that made I don't have too many gray hairs, but the ones that do, it's because it was crazy for just trying to like manage that, and you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off at times because you're trying to figure it all out and you're having to go like way above, and like there's way more challenges, way more stress. But because we took that on early on and we were able to survive it, I think it's given us that like entrepreneurial thick skin to be able to now we know like, hey, these are the questions we have to ask to get the results that we need, and these are the tools we need in place to get the results we need, and then just like really really analyze the data. So it's probably been tougher on my team, whereas like my they all say multitasking is not a great thing, but I've just learned to you kind of have to do that early on as an entrepreneur. And then like the deep work and all that stuff sounds great, but it's hard to do when you got a lot of different plates spinning and stuff like that. So it's a long way of saying, I think that like because of our onboarding process, it's just going to take longer. It's going to be a little bit more in depth for someone that we've maybe an industry we haven't worked with as much, but we're going to be able to figure it out if they're running a good business, and especially if they've already done some kind of marketing, so they have like a baseline for us to go off of. Because like a lot of times the hardest situation is when someone's never done any marketing and they're like, hey, we want more leads. It's like, okay, what have you done? Well, we haven't done anything yet. Well, it's like it's very hard to like draw like you can't draw a line unless you have 2 points. And so like if we don't have that first point that's like the baseline metric, it's very difficult for us to like forecast where it's going to go to. So in those situations, it's like, all right, we're going to have to like get as much data as we can. We're going to have to test the market early on, like test a budget. We don't know if this is going to be, we can go off of like, hey, you should be spending 3 to 5% on advertising, and just take like some baseline metrics that are, good business practices. And then from there, we're going to have to say like, okay, let's try this. And it's very rare that someone's not doing any advertising unless they're a startup, but you get the idea, right? Yeah. So then now we can just like have systematic growth and see what's working and what's not working. So it's just a lot of testing, but then having, like I said, make sure you're measuring it so that you can manage it moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But what's interesting is you said most people are doing some advertising, but I don't see that much veterinary advertising or marketing.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just not in the market. I have a dog. I've got a beagle, but I don't know. We've got our vet, and my wife takes him to the vet when he needs to go. But like, do you run into that often with veterinary practices where they're like, we've always been word of mouth, but it's my dream to open up a location, in the next county over, and I don't know how to make that happen without something other than word of mouth.
For sure. And right now, like during, COVID, like everyone went out and got dogs. I mean, there was shelters that were empty, for
really?
like, which for dogs.
I didn't even think about that, but it makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
They're at home. They're like, hey, I'm finally at home. I can always get that dog I wanted.
Yeah.
So vets are busier than they've ever been. And a lot of great practices don't need to advertise. I mean, there's a whole another dynamic there where like, it's really hard to find talent right now. Veterinary, like to hire veterinarians.
Sure.
So like their schedules are booked. I mean, they're burning the candle at both ends just to kind of serve the client base that they already have. So that's, again, and when I say marketing too, it's also like, hey, making sure that you have the number one position in Google Maps, making sure that you have the number one position organically. Because when someone does go to look for a vet, and now, especially in Florida, you have so many new people moving here. So when they get here, one of the things they need is a new veterinarian. So like to make sure that they're popping up in that top space, I mean, that's very, very valuable. In my book, I say the best place to hide your dog's annoying squeaky toy is on the second page of Google, because no one's going to go down there and and find it. So it's like you do want to have a presence if you have that growth and business mindset. But to your point, right now, vets are definitely in a they're very busy, and so like their conversation more needs to be like, hey, how do we attract the right kind of client? How do we increase our lifetime value of our client? Through maybe more like internal marketing our additional services,
Gotcha.
The upsell word's not nice in the medical community, but it's just, we get that, right? It's like, how do we like provide more value and, better educate our customers so that the treatment plans and the treatment of care is going to be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish and, get us the better clients in the door.
Interesting. So yeah, it's, I guess when you say marketing to the layman, a lot of times the first thing we hear is advertising.
Yeah.
But really, lifetime value of the customer is all about, do they know what you can do for them and how well you can do it and when you can do it and how you're going to do it.
Right. And so that's why we like to, a big part of us is how do we attract and retain customers, mainly clients and, for vets and patients for dentists and doctors. Cause like once, a big part of that is like you have to communicate with them and, you have to stay front of mind just like anything. Cause like you might, have gone into the dentist and when you had a toothache and then, but you're not going in for the compliance. You're not going in for like the regular cleanings and stuff like that. So that's an opportunity for you to educate them on the dental health and, what they need to be doing to make sure that they're coming in twice a year and that they're using if they have insurance, they're using it. So there's other, like marketing to your existing customer base, like your database is really important for these practices.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and just talk about, not switching gears a whole lot, but just specialization and niching in particular. And let's say that you were, it wasn't in the digital marketing space or the marketing space at all. It was just one of those things where somebody came to you advice, maybe a family member or somebody, and like, hey, I'm an electrician. I went out on my own a couple of years ago. Now I've got 2 or 3 trucks. And you make the case for specializing, like, and like, well, okay, maybe I could specialize in, I don't know, like whatever. What would your advice be? Maybe in identifying like where you should specialize or what the first steps would be to not just being a general electrician who does everything from installing ceiling fans to running wire for new houses, but like having a defined spot in the market where they were kind of king and everybody knew about them.
Yeah, and I think part of that is like the story helps. So like if they had like a family member who had, XY, like they became an electrician for some reason. Either like maybe they went to school, they worked for another company, and there was like a certain something that they really liked and they're really good at. So the more that you have that, that passion and that energy, I think it's going to resonate and it's going to like, resonate with the person that you're talking to. So like say they want to go, like, and right now, maybe like dental offices in their market are growing like crazy. They're building new dental offices or, right now we're seeing like, in Florida, you have all the, like different storage units or so like they find a blue ocean, if you will, like something where they know that there's opportunity here. Like, so they talk with someone, they talk with their network. And so they have an opportunity to like grow in that path. I think if they can like become experts at that side, like say the dental example, like they say like, hey, we did a new dental office and we know now all the challenges that are associated with like wiring a new dental office. And so that's an avenue where like now when you go to the next one, they're going to be able to come to them with the pain points. Like they're going to be able to identify that pain and they're going to be able to like identify, hey, these are some of the problems you might not have thought of, or these. So like the more they can like systemize that approach, it's going to come out when they're trying to like win the business. And then I think that story, it's going to give them more confidence and more conviction. And I think in any sales transaction, it's like whoever has the most conviction is going to be the one who ends up like, winning or closing that conversation, whoever has the most conviction. So like that's going to build their confidence. So I think if they're trying to like specialize down, like they got to find something that they resonate with and something that kind of like fills their tank, whether it's, just if they're just motivated by money or they're motivated by the industry or if they, so I think if you find your natural market, that's going to be, a really, really big help. And then having a few examples, like whether you have to do some stuff for cost or just get your foot in the door, I think that's a huge way, like everyone's heard the analogy of like, sweeping floors or, just to get your foot in the door of a big corporation. I think, with a trade or with any business in particular, there's a lot of opportunities where you can like test, like you've got to find a really viable testing ground. And so when you find that viable testing ground, you're going to find out real quick, like, hey, is there a need? Like, is it profitable? And is this something that I can scale? So like look for scale, which is going to be, is there, enough other people doing what you need to do so that you can grow it. And I wouldn't worry as much about the competition because I think there's tons of competitors in every industry right now. But if you do good work and like you're honest and transparent and, that's going to win at the end of the day.
What's interesting in what you just described is you didn't talk about, so if you're going to be an electrician wiring dental offices, you didn't talk about making sure you go and you get your low voltage certification too, or that you get your, you can run pneumatic tubing alongside your whatever. Like you didn't talk about like the technical skill set. You talked about, can you talk to the new dentist who's about to open an office about what their pain points are going to be? So you went straight to like, how are you going to differentiate yourself in the sales process? Because unless you can sell, you will never get the chance to develop the technical competency. But I think it's easier to send people off to school to get certified or to research distributors of whatever specialty product it is that we're going to need and we got to get certified to sell that product than it is to actually go out there and sell. When I was doing the online stuff, I had a coach who really encouraged me to do it. And then I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to pay you and you're going to tell me how to do it. And so he did. And one of the best pieces of advice he gave me is he said, before you sell this premium course and you start charging people thousands of dollars to go through it, you got to get 10 credit card numbers. And he goes, I don't want you to build the first piece of content. I want you to call people and tell them what you're going to teach them. And when you get 10 credit card numbers, then you'll be able to develop the curriculum. And it was in the course of probably 30 conversations or 40 conversations to get 10 credit card numbers that I started to figure out exactly what you're saying, the pain points. Like, what are they frustrated by? What language are they using? How are they running up against a brick wall? And what is the piece of information that they think they need that's going to make a difference, right? And so I loved your answer because it's counterintuitive to what we see in the field, which is, hey, we want to move into this segment of the market. There's this new product that's going to revolutionize the industry. We want to be the first ones. And they send people off to school and they get certified and they come back and they can't sell it. And 3 years later, it's like, yeah, we got $150,000 worth of equipment sitting in the corner of the warehouse that nobody has put to use. Right?
Well, and for sure, and then you start like commoditizing your services, whereas like you really want to be focused on the value side of the conversation. Like you want to make sure that we're focusing on how much value we can provide you, and not, hey, this is what we do, just the commodity piece of it. Because then someone can always come in and just charge a lower price to do the same thing. But if you're really focused on the value that you provide, then like you can bring in the technician. And so I think that's also to our earlier point is like if that's not your skill set, you need to make sure you have that skill set, because that's almost as difficult as just being able to execute on what you're talking about.
Well, and you said it earlier too. Sometimes when you're first starting out, the value proposition is cheap. Like we'll do it at cost because and like another thing I loved what you said, like if you're transparent, like if you go to, and we've advised clients to do this and seen them do it and say, go to a customer and say, look, we're trying to get a toehold in this market. And we got some crews and they're going to be learning along the way. We're going to do this job at cost for you so that we can, and you're going to benefit, but understand that we're asking for you to be patient too, because it's our first time. And you don't have to fake it till you make it. You can just be transparent with them, but deliver value, it maybe in the form of a cheaper price at the beginning end.
Yeah, and let them know, hey, if it's something like electrical, you probably need to make sure you have a mentor or someone who's coming in to check. There's going to be inspectors.
I promise you won't get shocked.
And have your liability insurance and all that kind of stuff. So
so anything you would, I'm always interested to ask this question. You, from an entrepreneur's standpoint, there was a time when you went out. I don't know. Did you leave a day job at any point to start your own business?
Yeah, I did. I was with, when I was doing sales and insurance, I had the opportunity to like kind of open my own office in the insurance space, and I had to really, make a decision. And then actually right as I was when I left the first, it wasn't really an agency. It was like another guy that I was just working with. He was the owner. I was kind of the VP. I actually, right as I was starting my web business, I got offered to open up a Chick-fil-A in Wheaton, Illinois. And so I was, I went through the whole process.
I didn't even know that happened. I didn't know. I thought you had to,
work your way up.
Oh yeah, I thought you had to travel.
This was back in so just right before the agency started. You didn't have to do that, but they said, hey, if you work, what their offer to me was is that I could work for a year in St. Pete under there, and then I could go open up a store in Chick-fil-A. So I went through the application process. They flew down from Atlanta and talked to me. So I had this big decision. I mean, Chick-fil-A is a sure thing, or start my own web development agency. And so it was that was the biggest which path are you going to choose? And so I chose obviously the web development.
So what's the thought that goes through your head now every time you drive by a Chick-fil-A?
Well, honestly, so at first they told me I was and back in the day I had the opportunity to you could go directly into opening a Chick-fil-A. They, because of my age and experience, they said, they asked me a question at the time, and I said some answer I like the idea of being able to go home and shut the day off or something like that. And they're like, well, as an entrepreneur, you don't really ever get to do that. And I think maybe I was nervous at the time or not answer the question. So like, I think about that question all the time because I'm like, man, now I never turn it off. It's like, it's always on. Like, it's like, I mean, I don't have to set an alarm clock most days of the week because I'm up and, ready to go. And so like they asked me that question and I was like, it is so like, there's so much foresight in that where like at the time, I was thinking like, oh man, maybe, I like the idea of, like with a Chick-fil-A, you kind of, it's run. It's like, I was kind of saying like, hey, it's structured but really when you run a business, I mean, it's always on your brain and it's always thinking. So I think that like, as I drive by, it's definitely motivation because I know, how successful Chick-fil-A operators are. And so it's like motivation to do this. But then I also see like how, when you own your own business, there's no cap on it either. Not that there's necessarily, I don't know what the caps are on Chick-fil-A, but I imagine it's different as a, I'm not a true at Kathy. So, I'm not going to ever, own the whole franchise or anything like that.
So if you're giving advice to somebody who was in that day job and whether it was, Chick-fil-A option or a business option, but they were like towing up to the edge of the cliff, wondering whether they should jump off. Like, what kind of advice would you give somebody?
Well, I think now there's so much knowledge out there. Like, there's probably someone who's doing what they're already doing, and that person's probably more willing to talk to you about it than they think. Like, there's probably some fear saying like, oh, I want to start my own, electrical company, or I want to become an electrician. But no electrician will tell me because he's going to think I'm a competitor or something. But that's not. I think people are, entrepreneurs and business owners in general are much more willing to like, pour into, I think there's like a mantra. You want to pay it forward and you want to, give back. I think the more entrepreneurs we have, the better it is for the world and society. I mean, more job, all that kind of stuff is going to come. And I think entrepreneurship is the backbone of a lot of what, made America as great as it did. So I think, get over that fear first. Like, I think your example is great of like, go out and get 10 credit cards, like get out of your comfort zone and test the waters a little bit. I mean, depending on your personality, like some people it's great just to like dive right in. Like you can't have a safety net, because like you got to like completely cut the cord and go out there and you're going to, sink or swim. So make sure you have, like don't put your family at risk and don't do anything, stupid on that side of things. But for some people you can like test the water. Like maybe you started as like a side hustle, if you want to get into, digital marketing, you can get a few clients and still keep your day job, like the whole adage of the, when a bookkeeper wants to become an accountant, they got to take night school to, get those classes if they want to be able to pay the bills and stuff like that. So I think there's those two paths that you can say, like, for some people, yes, cut the cord, go in, make sure you have, like don't put anyone at risk, like do that kind of stuff. Make sure you have like a, safety net. But for others, like maybe you just need to like kind of take a more, systematic approach. You need to just get a side hustle or, like do something in that space and definitely talk to people. There's so much information out there. I mean, it's such an easy thing that I think people just forget. They don't go and find the pain points. They just jump right in. So. Well,
to that point, I had a friend's father call me out of the blue the other day, and he just starts rattling off question after question about consulting, about Axiom. He's asking me 50 questions. And so I'm just answering his questions, not really thinking twice about it. And then eventually I'm like, okay, well, this is turning into an interview here. So I go, hey, John, why are you asking me all these questions? Just curious. And he goes, I'm thinking about starting a consulting business. I'm like, wait, you live in my area. So that's one way to do it. Just tell them at the end of the conversation.
Yeah, possibly. But he's probably not going to be able to go back to that well. It's the second time. So
that's great advice. And it's not advice that I've, it's unique. Nobody's said that before. And I think it's, if there's one thing that can put you, there's such a competitive strategic advantage in having mentors.
Yes.
People that, so like, imagine that conversation with a seasoned electrician that maybe runs a business. He hasn't been in a truck in 15 years because he's got 30 of them on the road or whatever. And he convinces you to like, do it, Joey, jump off the cliff. Like, you think that person's not going to be vested in you? Like, hey man, how you doing?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't get any. We'll give you some business. Like, we'll figure out a way to. You have these kind of natural allies because you've gone to them and said, hey, like, would you help me? And I totally agree. I think there are very few. People are aware of competitors when they're the same size, right? So or close to it. But nobody looks at somebody who's getting ready to start a business and be like, I'm not going to tell you anything because you might take it.
Right.
They're not worried about that, right?
Yeah.
So and in general, I will say that business owners, we get to work with a lot of business owners, and that's probably the most fun of what we do, like the actual characters that we work with, because some of them are characters. They're eccentric, they're hilarious, they're all kinds of things, but they also tend to be some of the most generous people you'll ever meet. And I think it's because if you're selfish and greedy and you aren't good at identifying what other people want and need, you tend not to last very long, right? The best businesses are the ones who figure out what the customer wants and needs and figure out a way to get it to them. And if they want repeat business, do it in a way that builds a relationship. So business owners, by and large, are just incredibly generous and gregarious and willing to help to a fault. Like, that's the other thing that we see is like, man, like, how many chances are you going to give this person? Right? It's like, well, just one more. So I like your advice. I would definitely encourage people to listen to you and say, if you've got an itch to go out and do something, start going through the phone book or Google and calls people and just say, hey, could I take you to lunch, or could we meet for a cup of coffee? I'm thinking about going into your industry, and I'd really respect your opinion if you could help me.
Yeah, and if they and sometimes it might not be right then, but like if someone isn't willing to do that, go find the next person. Yeah. There is someone who's gonna, it's like, and that's gonna teach you that tenacity that it takes to be successful, and knock on the next door and learn that no is the second best answer and find that golden yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, let's. I really thank you for your time. It's been cool to hear your story and all the nuggets of wisdom that you've learned from it. But we also want to take the opportunity. You're an expert in the industry, so we always want to get smarter, and give our clients and the people who are listening a chance to get smarter. So when we have somebody who is an expert in the industry, one of the things that we always want to ask is, what trends are you seeing in your space right now that would be helpful for our business owners to know?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, right now, it is a pay-to-play market. And so what that means is, like, Google and Facebook are not charities. They're not nonprofits in any sense of the word. Their job is to, maximize their return and maximize their profit. And so you there was businesses back in the day that could just, rank on Google and become, make millions and millions of dollars. But that's becoming more and more difficult to do, because Google, if you look at the homepage, you're starting to see ads. If you look really closely, Google wants to make sure that they're able to capture that click, and more and more they want the transaction to take place off of your website and on Google. So before, you'd find a website, they'd click to your website, and then you would be able to track that conversion and and remarket to them and retarget them. Whereas, like, now, if Google can make the transaction happen right on Google, like if you're able to book an appointment or book a call or book something right from Google, they can own that transaction process, and now they're able to charge for it. So, and then what you're going to have to get really good at is being able to make sure that you're paying, and Google has like years and years of data. Probably whatever comes after trillions, in terms of, in terms of data, trillions of data points that they're able to like base this off of. So they probably know your cost to acquire a lead more than you do. And so they're probably their goal is to arbitrage, right? They're trying to charge just enough so that you're having to pay more, and then they're making money on that spread. So you got to get really good at your cost to, acquire leads. And you also have to make sure that you're, really capturing your customers' data. Because like newsletters are still, like newsletters and text messaging. Text messaging is another big trend on how you can communicate with your customers. That's a way where you can then get the transaction away from Google, at least the follow-up transaction. It's very difficult for Google to get paid on that secondary transaction, but that's where like you can pay for that lead to come in, and then you're able to remarket to them and, market to them internally. So I think those would be like, pay to play, and make sure you're capturing data, because that's going to make your next cost to acquire that customer, and like your upsell or your resale is going to be much more economical.
So there are, we have several businesses that are what we would call like blue collar fleet businesses. So there's an office administrative component, and then there's a field labor component, whether it's technicians servicing air conditioners or plumbing or roofers or whatever. So there's all these other platforms, whether it's House or Nextdoor or Goodzer or so what are you seeing? I'm just curious, like, what are you seeing in, Google and Facebook are like the 800-pound gorillas. Are there any 200-pound gorillas that are coming? That's
tough, because Google and Facebook usually tend to buy those ones up. if they're really, or like right now in those spaces, there's something called Google Local Service Ads. And so yes, Google's the 800-pound gorilla, but Google Local Service Ads is putting a lot of those like home advisors and houses. I mean, they're really trying. I think they saw the dent that those had to their revenue, and so they're trying to come out and wipe those out and get paid directly rather than those companies making money. So Google Local Service Ads, if you have Google Local Service Ads in your industry, that's probably one of the most economical things you can do to attract new customers right away. If you don't, you need to be on the radar and find out when they open it, because like the sooner you're into that the first adopter into Google Local Service Ads, then that's gonna really help you out. And then as far as social media is concerned, I mean, like that's the thing. I think people are spending almost too much time on just organic social and not enough time on paid social. Like you're spending all this time, because social media was the same way. I mean, you could just post and get people to like buy into it. But now if you don't have influencers and you're not doing paid ads, I mean, yes, you still need to have a presence on those if your audience is spending time there, because it's just another way that you can keep your brand for relatively inexpensive. But think of those as like ways to, especially the industries you're talking about, think of those as ways to syndicate content, and not maybe like where your content roots. Like you want your content to root where your customer's spending the most time, and then those are areas where you're just maybe picking up some of the ancillary pieces.
So I'm thinking as a consumer for a home service, or even if I was looking for a veterinarian office to go visit, and I'm probably like most consumers, I'm going to Google it, and then like you said, I'm going to look at those top 3 that are showing up, maybe click the expand and see the top 10. But then I'm looking at reviews, and I'm just, okay, who's got the most and the highest reviews, and clicking into them, reading some of the best ones, some of the worst ones, and make my decision based off that. How much is it coming up with strategies with your clients of, this is the goal, this is where we need to get to with Google reviews, and this is how we're going to do it? Yeah,
reputation management is huge, and we're always trying. I mean, we're really, really big on, like that's now. I think when businesses go to sell in 5-10 years, like, you look at your, profit and loss, your balance sheet, I think that your reviews is going to be its own tab on there. Like the amount of reviews you have, the amount of, like reputation is so important. And so we really focus on that strategy. I mean, you have to have a software in place that's getting you reviews. That's what our new the new software we're kind of creating is going to help with a lot of that kind of stuff. But there's a ton of them out there that are really, really good. I think you have to even go the next step. Like, we like to, print up business cards that have a QR code on there that let them leave a review right away. If you can record a video on your phone and just send it to them asking for a review. I don't think people put enough effort into asking for that review. They say, hey, we tried. We send them an email. We send them a text. But just like if you just gave someone a flyer and you don't follow up with them, I mean, you're missing out on a lot of sales, because you have to, like, just like you have to nurture a lead that's coming into the business, I think you have to nurture a review to make sure they leave it, because it is so valuable. Like you said, there's so many people that are out there, skimming the reviews. And it's also a way that, so many people get bent up on the negative one, where if you just spent time getting 5 positive ones, now you have an 80%. Yeah. And then, you get 10 positive ones, now you have a 90%, like score. So like that's just focus on getting the good ones. Don't focus as bad on the bad ones, because there's even studies out there that say like a 4.8 out of 5 is better than a 5 out of 5, because it shows authenticity. And then how you respond to those negative reviews, they get to kind of see like, oh, this person, I get people, for the most part, the kind of people you want to be working with, they get it that some people are going to have a bad day, and they can like critically process that themselves. And so by having the response on that review of how you dealt with it, they're getting to see how you deal with them in case they had a bad situation. And so it's worth its weight in gold.
I think one of the best things that's happened in popular media, social media, probably the last 2 to 3 years, is the Karen and Carl phenomenon. Like all these people just acting like total idiots, and on YouTube or on whatever platform. And now when you read reviews, you're like, oh, I know exactly what kind of person that is, right? Yeah, for sure. And then you see, like, to your point, if you see a general manager or a business owner or whatever respond, like a sincere response of like, we would like to make it right, but you're like, oh, well, I would rather do business with somebody like, I think I know the kind of person they're dealing with, and they're still being gracious. It's almost like those bad reviews can validate as much as the 5-star review can.
And as an owner, like, look at the reviews to like monitor your own business. Like if you're getting a lot of negative reviews, like there's probably something wrong, and there's something you need to dive into. Like, like use that as a mirror to kind of reflect on what you're doing in some of your business practices. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing to see also. But yeah, there's a great one of the TV night show hosts like reads the negative reviews like for like goes through reading. It's great. I'll have to send the link and find
Okay.
it. But it's hilarious seeing some of the owners' responses, and when you read it out loud, it just it's you can only laugh at some of these. They're so ridiculous.
I always think it's so funny when they argue back with the customer in their
Yeah.
response.
That's a good point. It's like you always want to take it offline as
Yeah.
quick as possible. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to air your dirty laundry. Like you don't want to
Give me a call
Yeah.
at this number.
Exactly.
I'd be happy to
And
discuss this with
quick
you.
prompt. Deal with it. And
So, what are some of the more common mistakes you see small businesses make when they get into marketing?
yeah, so I think that there's a lot of businesses that like have this big advertising budget. Like they're like, oh, we're willing to spend. We can spend $10,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $50,000 a month. And then they're not tracking the data and all the different data points. So they're like, oh, we only pay, we paid $50, $60, $70 per click, and we're not getting any results. But like then they're not putting call tracking in place, which is very inexpensive and like auditing their staff, auditing their front. Like they just like, oh, their team's great. They're doing this. So they're not putting the things in place, and they're not like going through and like checking early on how well like what's working and what's not working. So. I think it was the CEO of Fidelity or one of those. He used to go like once a quarter or whatever the time frame was. He would go to the call center and like listen to the calls, so he actually got to hear from the front lines like what's actually going on. And I don't think enough people who are starting a big marketing campaign are doing that. So they might be spending $10,000 a month, and then like the first thing they say is like a new client calls. They just spent $70 for this lead, and the first thing they say is, "Can you please hold?" Like that's the first thing you're saying to a person that you just spent $70. I mean, that's like throwing that money out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that hopefully we see more of is access to better tech tool sets for small businesses. So like a call center would have an integrated system that can identify the incoming caller, pull up the CR record, and you can see the last purchase, existing issues, fulfillment in process, that kind of stuff. And we started to see more and more of that. A lot of the cloud-based solutions. We've a client that talk about somebody who's a business that's focused on niching. Service Titan got really, really specific about if you got 5 trucks, we're the software platform for you. And the client that we work with has way more than that, but they know like where the gravy's at, and it's that small contractor. But these tools are phenomenal. It's all in the cloud. Every phone call's there. You can listen to it. You can identify the record coming in. Stuff that would have cost $500,000 to implement for a 200-person business that wasn't touchable. They wouldn't go that because it was a 20,000 person business or a 10,000 person business that would invest in these tools. Now you can have it off the shelf for $100 per user per month or something like that.
It's very, very those kind of things are changing the way. But make sure you're using it right. You're tracking all these calls. Like make sure you're using that data and like you're setting benchmarks and making that part of your goals. And
the call tracking number thing is amazing.
Yeah.
Because we've walked into businesses before and like, do we have call tracking numbers? I think so. Somebody had them around here at one time. So we start reaching out to all the different channel partners that we have, whether it's radio or television or internet, and it turns out we've got like 50 of them, right? And they're all coming in, right? But nobody's looking at the logs to see.
Or do they have one call tracking number, and now it's like, well, how, like, it's just
Right.
You rely on human error. At the time, it's like, oh yeah, we got most of our calls from Google. Well, was it Google Ads? Was it Google Maps? Was it Google Organic? Like now you can put a different number for each of those, and it makes the reporting super transparent.
Do you have any tips or tricks for that ubiquitous question, like where'd you hear about us from? And we go into the logs, and like 80% of them are other.
Yeah, I think that you have to put a huge emphasis on the whoever's answering the phone. They have to have that follow through, and that just has to become like part of the job description. So and you can't wait till the end of the month. To check on that. You need to be checking on that regularly, right? Because you need to be like going through and seeing like, okay, this they didn't keep track. Like if a bunch of them are other, they probably just aren't asking.
Right.
They're just like, oh yeah, we got this person. They're just checking.
It's not an
checking the button.
inconsequential piece of information, but
Right.
on the screen it just looks one more field I got to fill out.
Exactly. But that I think you got to make sure like you just have to. That comes through training and education and like letting them know the why. Right. You hear about the why. Like, hey, we need to know this. Because it's the same thing like in our business. Like you have to track your time because that's how we bill and that's how we make sure that we're staying, doing all the work and being good stewards of what our clients are entrusting us to. So part of the job description.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
I like that. Is there anything you see? You mentioned it's definitely a pay-to-play market with the Google and Facebook guys, and you got to understand that if you're going in. Are there any other trends or anything else you see that's going to be particularly challenging for small business over the next, say, 12 months or so?
Well, like there's these, like the big businesses are spending so much on ads, and so like I think you have to really identify your customer. Like you have to know those personas that you're, trying to reach out to, so that you can like, hyper target them. And other businesses are just putting huge sales teams out there to like kind of just bombard. So you have to like work on your messaging in that regard. I think you have to have those communication points, and that's why I think text message is like probably the most under leveraged tool, because people are like, oh, we never got their cell phones, we don't want to bug them, they don't, but like if you don't want to bug them, someone else is going to bug them. So like and they're so like you got to ask like, hey, what's the best way to communicate with you? And like rather than asking like, hey, do you want us to text you? It should be like, hey, are you okay with us texting you? Because that's the best way for us to get XYZ information to you in a prompt manner so you can make an informed decision and buy. Rather than just saying like, do you want to text yes or no? Saying like, hey, we would like to text you because of this, is that okay? So it's like much easier to get like, so like just that language can make a big difference, and same thing with like email. Emails are getting, bombarded, like there's so many emails, and eventually that's eventually going to happen to our text messaging because the way it seems like the laws are changing and stuff like that. But get ahead of that. I think, get the cell phones, communicate with them, because I mean, everyone has their cell phone around them. I mean, I work off an iPad so much, sometimes I don't even check my laptop for a day,
Right.
So it's you got to get to that route. I think would be a big thing there.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, it's been, I've learned a lot. I got a lot of notes here in front of me, so I really appreciate you bringing your knowledge and expertise and your stories. It's been a fun interview. We talked about it before you came down, and we're like, this is going to be a fun one. We were really looking forward to it. So thanks for coming down. And thanks for being a part of it.
It's been great.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next week when we do another episode. I don't even know what it's on, Cameron. Maybe
we'll
you
find
know
out.
next week. But until then, take care, and we'll see you back here next week. All right, we're officially done.
Let the ears breathe.
Yeah.
It's good stuff, man. That's great.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's fun. It's always you try even with the questions, you try to kind of have like the narrative in your head, but it's good to just when you start talking more freely,
Yeah. Good stuff.
It gets better.
Is there anything you want to circle back to in after show thoughts or comments?
I think, I'm glad we went down the Google review route.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was going to come back to, and you covered it. So, I mean, that was good. And we could go on and on, because toward the end we're starting to get into tactics and stuff, and that's where.
Yeah, if there's anything you
I
want
can
to
go
go
through
more
rabbit
on
trail.
that stuff too.
I think
so.
we're good. I think that was really good. Brought your own snacks.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I'll put it in my
Love nuts, man.